Every objection is a ticking bomb, and you're walking into every conversation wired to explode. You feel it coming, that sinking sensation, that sudden defensiveness, that painful realization you've lost control again. You're not alone. 99% of professionals stumble here, battling objections like blindfolded soldiers caught in crossfire. They react too slowly, respond too weakly, and lose deals they should have easily closed. Is this the life you signed up for? Always defending, always retreating, always second-guessing yourself? But what if you flip the script? Imagine having an arsenal so powerful you turn objections from threats into allies, doubt into confidence, resistance into rapid agreement. That's exactly what you're about to unlock. Disarm Objections: How to Turn Doubt into Quick Agreement doesn't promise shortcuts. It delivers a ruthless, systematic approach that elite negotiators and top 1% closers already use every day. You'll stop being ambushed by objections and start hunting them down before they ever surface. Science proves it. Anticipating and dismantling objections beforehand boosts your persuasion success by over 60%. That's not luck, that's tactical certainty. The chapters ahead offer battle-tested tools, the objection anticipation matrix, tactical empathy techniques, emotional mapping, and lightning-fast rapid rebuttals. No vague theories here, just precise, actionable steps to anticipate resistance, shatter skepticism, and convert doubt into instant trust. So ask yourself right now, will you remain trapped in a loop of endless objections, fumbling for answers and losing ground? Or will you step up, take control, and master the art of objection handling once and for all? The choice is yours, because this isn't just another skill, it's your professional duty. Commit now to conquering doubt, obliterating hesitation, and forging ironclad agreement from every interaction. Your journey from frustrated to formidable starts right here. Turn the page and never fear objections again. Chapter 1: Anticipate Resistance. Your next pitch is walking into an ambush. Right now, while you're rehearsing your opening lines and polishing your slides, your prospect is already loading their arsenal. They're crafting objections, building walls of doubt, and preparing to fire. I need to think about it the moment you pause for breath. You think you're walking into a conversation. You're actually stepping onto a battlefield where the enemy has already chosen their position. Here's what separates the 1% who close deals from the 99% who chase maybe. The winners see the sniper before the shot is fired. They don't just prepare for objections. They hunt them down, dissect them, and turn them into weapons for their own arsenal. While everyone else plays defense, scrambling to answer doubts as they surface, the elite play offense. They anticipate resistance before it forms and inoculate themselves against every attack. The science backs this up with brutal clarity. McGuire's groundbreaking research from the 1960s proved that people exposed to weakened versions of counter-arguments became 60% more resistant to stronger persuasion attempts later. Think of it like a vaccine. Inject yourself with a small dose of the objection virus, build your immunity, and walk into the real battle bulletproof. A meta-analysis of 54 experiments confirmed this across every context imaginable: politics, sales, health messaging. The effect size? A solid 0.43, meaning inoculation consistently outperforms raw talent or luck. You're about to learn the objection anticipation matrix, a systematic approach to predicting, cataloging, and neutralizing resistance before it can kill your momentum. This isn't about hoping for the best or thinking on your feet. This is about engineering certainty in an uncertain world. Most people stumble through conversations blind, reacting to objections like they're surprise attacks. They fumble for responses, lose credibility with every and well, and watch their prospect's eyes glaze over as doubt crystallizes into rejection. You're going to do the opposite. You're going to see every objection coming from a mile away, meet it with surgical precision, and turn skepticism into agreement so smoothly your prospect won't even realize what happened. The first step is defining your battlefield. You need to map the territory before you can control it. Start by listing every core claim you'll make in your pitch. What are you asking them to believe? What action are you requesting? What promises are you making? Each claim is a potential target for objection fire. Write them down, Be specific. Vague claims breed vague defenses. Next, flip the script. For every claim you make, what's the natural counterclaim? If you say your solution saves time, they'll think about implementation delays. If you promise results, they'll worry about risk. If you quote a price, they'll question value. Don't just think like yourself. Think like your most skeptical prospect. What would make them say no? What would make them hesitate? What would make them walk away? Now comes the critical part, ranking these objections by their destructive power. Not all doubts are created equal. Some objections are flesh wounds, annoying but survivable. Others are kill shots that end conversations instantly. You need to know the difference. Rank each potential objection on 3 dimensions. Frequency, how often does this come up? Intensity, how emotionally charged is this concern? And decision impact, does this objection typically kill deals or just slow them down? The objections that score high on all 3 dimensions, those are your priority targets. These are the resistance patterns that have been murdering your close rate, and they're about to become extinct. For each high-priority objection, you need a preemptive strike plan. This isn't about waiting for them to voice their concern and then responding. This is about addressing their unspoken doubt before they even realize they have it. You'll deploy 3 weapons: data drops that make their concern seem irrational, social proof that shows others like them moving forward despite similar fears, and reframing that shifts their perspective entirely. The matrix itself is built on 4 quadrants that cover every angle of human resistance: logic, emotion, credibility, and logistics. Logic objections attack your reasoning. This won't work because. Emotion objections target feelings. I'm not comfortable with. Credibility objections question your authority. How do I know you can deliver? Logistics objections focus on practical concerns. We don't have time for this right now. Each quadrant requires a different approach, but the principle remains the same. Weaken the objection with a mild version, then deliver a knockout refutation. For logic objections, present a smaller version of their concern and systematically dismantle it with evidence. For emotional objections, acknowledge the feeling and redirect it toward a positive outcome. For credibility objections, stack proof points that make doubt seem unreasonable. For logistics objections, break down the process to show how simple implementation really is. The weaken refute drill is where theory becomes muscle memory. Take each objection in your matrix and craft a 2-sentence response. First sentence, acknowledge and weaken. Second sentence, redirect and advance. Practice this until you can fire these responses without thinking. Speed kills hesitation. The faster you can neutralize an objection, the less time it has to metastasize into deal-killing doubt. But preparation is only half the battle. You need early warning sensors that detect resistance before it goes nuclear. Learn to read the language cues that signal brewing doubt. When someone says, "That's interesting," instead of "That's exactly what we need," doubt is forming. When they start asking about implementation details before agreeing on the problem, they're building escape routes. When their questions shift from how to what if, resistance is crystallizing. Body language tells the story, their words won't. Watch for micro shifts. Leaning back when you mention price, crossed arms when you discuss timelines, furrowed brows when you make bold claims. These aren't random gestures. They're early warning signals that objections are loading in the chamber. Catch them early, and you can diffuse them before they explode. Real-time note tagging during conversations creates a feedback loop that makes you smarter with every interaction. Develop shorthand symbols for different types of resistance. When you spot a pattern, tag it. When an objection surprises you, log it. When a response works perfectly, mark it for replication. Your matrix isn't static. It's a living weapon that evolves with every battle. The debrief phase separates professionals from amateurs. After every significant conversation, conduct a post-mortem on objections. Which ones surfaced? Which ones didn't? Where did your responses land perfectly, and where did they miss the mark? This isn't about beating yourself up over mistakes. It's about extracting intelligence that makes your next encounter more lethal. Weekly pattern reviews keep your matrix sharp and current. Objections evolve as markets change, as competitors adapt, as your own messaging shifts. What killed deals last quarter might be irrelevant today. What seemed minor last month might be trending toward major. Update your matrix. Retire dead objections. Promote emerging threats. Your anticipation system is only as good as its latest intelligence. Your victory metric is simple but powerful. Objection-free, close rate, trending upward. When you're truly anticipating resistance, conversations start flowing differently. Prospects stop throwing up walls because you've already addressed their concerns. They stop asking what-if questions because you've already painted the picture. They stop hesitating because you've removed every reason to doubt. This is what mastery looks like. Walking into high-stakes conversations with the quiet confidence that comes from seeing around corners. While your competition stumbles through objections like they're navigating a minefield blindfolded, you'll glide through resistance like it's not even there. The most dangerous objection is the one you never see coming. But with the objection anticipation matrix locked and loaded, that will never happen again. You'll predict resistance before it forms, neutralize doubt before it spreads, and turn every skeptic into a believer. But anticipating objections is just the first weapon in your arsenal. Once you've mapped the battlefield and prepared your defenses, you need to master the art of disarming resistance in real time. The next chapter reveals how tactical empathy can melt the hardest defenses in 60 seconds flat without surrendering a single inch of your position. Before we continue, make sure to subscribe to Grow to the Top and activate notifications to receive more self-improvement tips that will supercharge your growth. And make sure to give this video a thumbs up and share it with your friends. It really helps the channel grow. Thank you for your support. Chapter 2, Tactical Empathy. They're building walls faster than you can tear them down. Every word you speak triggers their defense systems. Every claim you make activates their skepticism circuits. Every benefit you promise gets filtered through layers of doubt, distrust, and self-protection. You're not just fighting their objections, you're fighting their brain's hardwired survival instincts that scream danger whenever someone tries to change their mind. Here's the brutal truth. Logic doesn't win arguments. Facts don't close deals. Data doesn't dissolve doubt. The human brain makes emotional decisions first, then reverse engineers logical justifications afterward. If you're leading with spreadsheets and bullet points, you're bringing a calculator to a knife fight. But what if you could flip their brain from threat detection mode to cooperation mode in under 60 seconds? What if you could make their defenses crumble without firing a single logical argument? What if you could turn their resistance into alliance so smoothly they'd think it was their idea? This is the power of tactical empathy, the ability to mirror their world so perfectly that their brain stops seeing you as an adversary and starts treating you as an ally. It's not about being nice or agreeable. It's about weaponizing human psychology to create instant rapport that bypasses conscious resistance entirely. The science behind this is devastating in its simplicity. UCLA researchers discovered that when someone mirrors your behavior, your brain releases oxytocin, the same hormone that bonds mothers to babies and lovers to each other. Your mirror neurons fire as if you're looking at yourself, creating an unconscious sense of kinship that's impossible to fake and nearly impossible to resist. Field studies prove the power. Negotiators using mirroring techniques close deals 20% more often than those who don't. Salary negotiations using these methods result in 33% higher compensation packages. Sales professionals who master tactical empathy see their close rates spike while their objection rates plummet. Your prospect's brain is constantly asking one question: are you friend or foe? Answer wrong, and every word you speak gets filtered through suspicion. Answer right, and their defenses dissolve like sugar in rain. The first weapon in your tactical empathy arsenal is so simple it seems almost insulting to your intelligence. Yet it's so powerful that hostage negotiators stake lives on it, and master salespeople use it to close million-dollar deals. It's called verbal echoing, and it works by hijacking your prospect's own words and playing them back with surgical precision. When they say, "We're concerned about the implementation timeline," you don't launch into a detailed project plan. Instead, you simply repeat their last few words with an upward inflection. Implementation timeline? Then you shut up and let the magic happen. This isn't parroting. This isn't mindless repetition. This is strategic mirroring that forces their brain to elaborate, to go deeper, to reveal the real concerns hiding beneath surface objections. Those 3 words, implementation timeline, will unlock more valuable intelligence than 20 minutes of probing questions. The key is the upward inflection. It signals curiosity, not challenge. It says, "Tell me more," without actually asking. It creates space for them to expand on their concern while making them feel heard and understood. Most people spend conversations waiting for their turn to talk. You're going to spend conversations making them feel like the most interesting person in the room. But verbal echoing is just the surface layer. The real power comes from tonal calibration, matching not just their words, but the rhythm and pace of their speech. When someone speaks quickly, they're energized or anxious. When they speak slowly, they're thoughtful or cautious. When they speak softly, they're uncertain or intimate. Match their tempo, and you match their emotional state. There's a specific pace that melts resistance faster than any other, the late-night DJ voice. Slow, deliberate, slightly deeper than normal. This pace triggers a neurological response that drops cortisol levels and activates the parasympathetic nervous system. Their fight-or-flight response shuts down. Their analytical mind comes online. Their defenses lower without them realizing it's happening. Practice this pace until it becomes second nature. When tension rises, slow down. When they speed up, you slow down. When they get louder, you get quieter. You become the calm in their storm, the steady presence that makes them feel safe enough to let their guard down. Physical mirroring amplifies the effect exponentially. When they lean forward, you lean forward, but not immediately. Wait 2 to 3 seconds, then mirror their posture. When they cross their arms, you cross yours. When they gesture, you gesture. The delay is crucial because immediate mirroring feels creepy and obvious. Delayed mirroring feels natural and subconscious. But here's where most people get tactical empathy completely wrong. They think it's about agreement. They think mirroring means nodding along with everything their prospect says. They think empathy requires surrender. Dead wrong. Tactical empathy isn't about agreeing with their position. It's about understanding their emotion. You can validate their feelings without validating their logic. You can acknowledge their concerns without accepting their conclusions. You can make them feel heard without giving them what they want. The second weapon in your arsenal is emotional labeling, the practice of naming their feelings out loud so they feel understood at a cellular level. When someone is frustrated, you don't ignore the frustration or try to logic it away. You label it. It sounds like you're feeling frustrated with how long this process is taking. This does something remarkable to the human brain. When you accurately label someone's emotion, their amygdala, the brain's alarm system, literally calms down. The act of being understood triggers a neurological shift from emotional reactivity to rational thinking. They stop feeling attacked and start feeling supported. The language you use for labeling is critical. You never want to say, "You are frustrated." That feels like a diagnosis, like you're telling them how they feel. Instead, you use softer sentence stems. "It sounds like," or "it seems you're," or "I'm sensing that." These phrases create emotional distance while still acknowledging their state. Even more important is what you don't label. Never label negative emotions as negative. If they're angry, you don't say "you seem angry." You say "you seem passionate about getting this right." If they're worried, you don't say "you're worried." You say "you seem thoughtful about the implications." You take their negative emotion and reframe it as a positive trait. This isn't manipulation, it's recontextualization. You're helping them see their own emotions in a more empowering light while simultaneously making them feel understood. Their brain gets the validation it craves while their self-image remains intact. After you label their emotion, you deploy the most powerful tool in the tactical empathy toolkit, strategic silence. You count 3 full beats, 1 Mississippi, 2 Mississippi, 3 Mississippi, and force them to fill the space. This silence is uncomfortable for you, but irresistible for them. They will elaborate. They will go deeper. They will reveal information they never intended to share. Most people are terrified of silence in conversations. They rush to fill every pause with words, explanations, justifications. You're going to do the opposite. You're going to use silence as a weapon that makes them do the work of convincing themselves. But tactical empathy has boundaries, and knowing where those boundaries are separates professionals from amateurs. Empathy doesn't mean agreement. Understanding their position doesn't require accepting their position. You can validate their feelings while maintaining your own objectives. When someone says, "I don't think this is the right time," you don't argue with their timing. You label the underlying emotion. It sounds like you want to make sure the timing is perfect for something this important. You've validated their concern without accepting their conclusion. You've made them feel heard without surrendering your position. Sometimes mirroring backfires. Sometimes your prospect catches on to what you're doing and calls you out. When this happens, you don't deny it or get defensive. You use a pattern interrupt pivot phrase. "You're absolutely right. I am trying to understand your perspective because this decision is too important to get wrong." You acknowledge their awareness while reframing your behavior as professional diligence rather than manipulation. The reinforcement loop is what transforms tactical empathy from a one-time trick into a permanent competitive advantage. After every significant conversation, you log the emotional shifts you observed. When did their tone change? What triggered their defenses? Which labels landed perfectly and which ones missed the mark? This emotional intelligence data becomes part of your growing arsenal. You also need to practice when the stakes are low. Spend 5 minutes every day doing cold mirror exercises with random statements. Watch how people respond when you echo their words. Notice how their body language changes when you match their pace. Feel how the energy in conversations shifts when you deploy strategic silence. Your key performance indicator is simple but revealing. Track the ratio of adversarial language to collaborative language in your conversations. When someone says "but," "however," or "I disagree," that's adversarial. When they say "and," "also," or "what if we," that's collaborative. Master tactical empathy, and you'll watch that ratio flip dramatically in your favor. The most sophisticated objection handling techniques in the world are worthless if your prospect's brain is locked in defensive mode. But when you mirror their world so perfectly that their defenses dissolve, when you label their emotions so accurately that they feel truly understood, when you create space for them to convince themselves, that's when real influence begins. Tactical empathy isn't about being liked, it's about being trusted. It's about creating the psychological safety that allows rational decision-making to occur. It's about turning adversaries into allies without surrendering an inch of your position. But understanding their emotions is only the beginning. Once you've gained their trust and lowered their defenses, you need to map the deeper currents that drive their decisions. The next chapter reveals how to decode the invisible forces that control every choice they make, forces they don't even know exist. Chapter 3, Emotional Mapping. They're lying to you. Not intentionally, not maliciously, but every single prospect you encounter is feeding you a carefully constructed fiction about what they really want, what they really fear, and what will actually drive their decision. They don't even know they're doing it. Their conscious mind presents one story while their emotional brain operates on completely different programming. When they say, "We need to see the ROI projections," what they really mean is, "I'm terrified of making a mistake that destroys my career." When they claim the timing isn't right, they're actually saying, "I don't trust myself to make this decision correctly." When they insist, "We need to think it over," they're confessing, "I'm overwhelmed by forces I can't even name." The gap between what people say and what they feel is where deals go to die. It's where perfectly logical proposals get rejected for reasons that make no sense. It's where slam dunk opportunities evaporate into thin air because you solved the wrong problem, addressed the wrong concern, and missed the emotional engine that actually drives their choices. But what if you could see through the smokescreen? What if you could decode the hidden emotional operating system that controls every decision they make? What if you could map their invisible landscape of fears and desires so precisely that influencing them becomes as simple as connecting dots? This is emotional mapping, the systematic process of converting fuzzy feelings into hard intelligence you can weaponize. It's about taking the swirling chaos of human emotion and organizing it into clear, actionable data that tells you exactly which buttons to push and exactly when to push them. Research from leading universities proves that professionals with high emotional intelligence resolve workplace conflicts 27% more effectively than their peers. But here's the kicker. Negotiators who use structured empathy mapping close deals with 15% higher joint value. They don't just win more often, they win bigger. The reason is simple but profound. When you understand someone's emotional landscape, you stop selling to their logical mind and start selling to their emotional truth. You stop addressing their stated concerns and start solving their actual problems. You stop pushing against their resistance and start pulling them toward what they secretly want. Most people navigate emotional terrain like they're stumbling through a dark room, bumping into furniture and hoping they don't break anything valuable. You're about to get night vision goggles. The foundation of emotional mapping rests on a deceptively simple 4-quadrant framework that captures the full spectrum of human motivation. Think of it as an X-ray machine for the human psyche. It reveals the hidden structures that support every decision. The first quadrant captures what they think. This is the rational, logical layer they present to the world. It's their stated requirements, their official criteria, their conscious reasoning process. This quadrant is important because it tells you how they'll justify their decision to others, but it's not what actually drives their choice. The second quadrant maps what they feel. This is where the real power lives, the emotional undercurrents that actually control their behavior: fear of failure, desire for recognition, anxiety about change, hope for transformation. These feelings are often unspoken, sometimes unconscious, but always decisive. The third quadrant documents what they say. This includes not just their words, but how they say them, the language they choose, the metaphors they use, the energy behind their statements, the gaps between their claims and their tone. This quadrant reveals the disconnect between their internal experience and their external presentation. The fourth quadrant tracks what they do. Actions never lie. Body language, micro-expressions, response patterns, decision history, these behaviors tell the truth their words might obscure. When someone says they're very interested while leaning away from you, their body is voting against their words. But creating the map is just the beginning. The real skill lies in asking the right questions to populate each quadrant with actionable intelligence. You need question prompts that bypass their conscious filters and tap directly into their emotional operating system. For the thinking quadrant, you probe their logical framework. What criteria are most important to you in making this decision? But you're not just collecting their checklist, you're understanding how they organize their rational world. For the feeling quadrant, you dig deeper. What would success look like for you personally? Or what keeps you up at night about this situation? These questions force them to access emotional truth rather than logical analysis. For the saying quadrant, you listen not just to content, but to patterns. How do you typically describe this challenge to others? The language they use reveals their internal narrative about the problem. For the doing quadrant, you observe everything. Walk me through your last decision-making process for something similar. Their actions in the past predict their actions in the future. As you gather this intelligence, you need a system for organizing it that reveals patterns and priorities. Color coding becomes your secret weapon. Red signals fear-based motivations, anything that moves them away from pain. Green indicates desire-based drivers, anything that pulls them toward pleasure. Yellow marks uncertainty or ambivalence, areas where they're conflicted or confused. This color system transforms abstract emotions into concrete data. When you see a prospect's map dominated by red, you know fear is driving their decision-making process. Your entire approach shifts from selling benefits to providing security. When green dominates, you focus on amplifying their vision of success rather than minimizing their risks. The magic happens when you translate these emotional insights into tactical leverage. Every fear becomes an opportunity to position your solution as protection. Every desire becomes a chance to paint your offering as the bridge to their ideal future. Every uncertainty becomes a space where your expertise can provide clarity and confidence. Take their deepest fear and align your primary benefit with relieving that specific anxiety. If they're terrified of implementation failure, your main selling point isn't features or functionality, it's your foolproof implementation process. If they're worried about team resistance, you lead with change management support. If they're concerned about budget overruns, you emphasize cost predictability. This alignment isn't manipulation, it's precision. You're not creating artificial fears or manufacturing desires. You're simply connecting what you offer with what they actually need at an emotional level. Price becomes particularly powerful when reframed through their emotional map. Instead of presenting your fee as an expense, you position it as insurance against their primary fear. The cost isn't what they're paying, it's what they're protecting. When someone's biggest worry is falling behind competitors, your price becomes the cost of staying competitive. When their fear is missed opportunities, your investment becomes the price of certainty. But emotional maps aren't static documents you create once and file away. They're living intelligence that evolves throughout every interaction. You need systems for updating them in real time as new information emerges. During live conversations, develop shorthand icons that let you capture emotional shifts without breaking your flow. A simple arrow up for rising confidence, arrow down for growing doubt, a plus sign for positive emotions, minus for negative, a question mark for confusion or uncertainty. These quick notations let you track emotional momentum without losing focus on the conversation. After every significant interaction, conduct a gap analysis. What emotions did you identify? Which ones did you address effectively? What feelings emerged that you hadn't anticipated? Where did your emotional map prove accurate, and where did it miss the mark? This post-meeting review transforms every conversation into intelligence that improves your next encounter. The indicators of emotional mapping mastery are subtle but unmistakable. When you're reading someone's emotional landscape accurately, their "I'm not sure" pauses become less frequent. They stop hedging their statements with uncertainty because you're addressing their real concerns rather than their surface objections. You'll also notice faster pivots from surface objections to root concerns. Instead of spending 20 minutes debating implementation timelines, you'll quickly identify that their real worry is team adoption, and the conversation shifts to addressing that core fear. Your prospects will start using more collaborative language. Instead of "I need to think about it," they'll say, "Help me understand how this addresses." Instead of "We're not ready," they'll ask, "What would the first step look like?" The shift from defensive to exploratory language signals that you've moved from adversary to advisor in their emotional landscape. Perhaps most importantly, you'll start seeing patterns across different prospects that seemed completely unrelated. The CFO worried about budget overruns and the VP concerned about team productivity are actually experiencing the same core emotion: fear of being blamed for negative outcomes. Once you recognize this pattern, you can address it proactively rather than reactively. Emotional mapping transforms every conversation from a guessing game into a strategic operation. You stop throwing solutions at problems and start delivering precisely what their emotional brain is actually seeking. You stop fighting their resistance and start flowing with their natural motivations. But understanding their emotional landscape is only half the battle. Once you've mapped their fears and desires, you need to reshape how they see reality itself. The next chapter reveals how to flip their entire perspective so that identical facts lead to completely different conclusions, and how a single reframe can turn their biggest objection into their strongest reason to move forward. Chapter 4. Reframe doubt. Reality is negotiable. The same set of facts can trigger completely opposite decisions depending on how those facts are presented. The same opportunity can appear as a brilliant investment or a dangerous gamble. The same timeline can feel urgent or premature. The same price can seem like a bargain or a burden. Nothing about the underlying truth changes, only the frame around it. Your prospects aren't rejecting your solution because it's wrong. They're rejecting it because they're seeing it through the wrong lens. They're trapped in a mental frame that makes action feel risky, expensive, and uncertain. But frames aren't permanent fixtures. They're movable windows that you can adjust, flip, and completely reconstruct. This is the most dangerous weapon in your persuasion arsenal, the ability to take identical information and make it lead to entirely different conclusions. When you master reframing, you stop arguing with their logic and start controlling their perspective. You stop fighting their objections and start reshaping the reality in which those objections exist. The science behind this is both elegant and devastating. Nobel Prize winner Daniel Kahneman's prospect theory revealed that human decisions aren't based on objective reality, they're based on reference points. Change the reference point and you change the decision. The famous Asian disease experiment proved this with surgical precision. A simple wording change flipped public preference from 72% risk-averse to 78% risk-seeking. Same disease, same statistics, same lives at stake, completely opposite choices. The implications are staggering. Every conversation you have is happening inside a frame, and whoever controls that frame controls the outcome. Your prospects aren't making rational decisions based on facts. They're making emotional decisions based on how those facts are positioned relative to their mental reference points. Most people surrender frame control without even realizing there's a battle happening. They accept their prospect's perspective as fixed reality and then wonder why perfectly logical arguments fall flat. They fight within the frame instead of fighting for the frame. They try to win the game instead of changing the rules. You're about to learn how to become the architect of perception itself. The first step is diagnosing the current frame your prospect is operating within. This requires a language audit that reveals the invisible structure of their thinking. Listen for loss words versus gain words. When someone talks about avoiding problems, preventing mistakes, or reducing risk, they're operating in a loss frame. When they discuss capturing opportunities, achieving goals, or maximizing returns, they're in a gain frame. The frame determines everything. In a loss frame, your solution becomes another potential source of pain, more complexity, more risk, more things that could go wrong. In a gain frame, your solution becomes a vehicle for achieving their aspirations, more growth, more efficiency, more competitive advantage. But the frame isn't just about individual words. It's about the entire reference point structure they're using to evaluate options. What are they comparing your solution against? The status quo? A competitor's offering? Their ideal fantasy solution? Their worst-case scenario? Each reference point creates a different frame that leads to different conclusions. When they compare your solution to doing nothing, you're fighting an uphill battle against inertia and loss aversion. When they compare it to their biggest competitor's advantage, you're leveraging their competitive drive. When they compare it to their current pain points, you're positioning yourself as relief. The same solution, the same benefits, the same price, but completely different emotional impact depending on the reference point. The art of reframing lies in recognizing these invisible structures and then systematically dismantling them to build new ones that serve your objectives. You don't argue with their current frame, you acknowledge it, then offer a more compelling alternative perspective. 3 frame flip templates will handle 90% of the reframing situations you encounter. The first is the cost of inaction frame. When someone is focused on the risk of moving forward, you flip their attention to the risk of standing still. You take their loss-averse instincts and redirect them toward the losses they'll experience by not acting. I understand you're concerned about the investment required. Let me ask you this. What's the cost of your team continuing to work with the current system for another year? What opportunities are you missing while your competitors are gaining ground? What's the price of staying exactly where you are? This isn't about creating artificial urgency. It's about balancing their risk equation. They're already calculating the downside of action. You're simply ensuring they also calculate the downside of inaction. The second template is the future self frame. This technique projects them forward in time to a point where the decision has already been made and the results are visible. You help them experience the emotional reality of both paths, the regret of missing the opportunity and the satisfaction of seizing it. Picture yourself 12 months from now. In one scenario, you decided to move forward and your team is operating at a completely different level. In the other scenario, you decided to wait and you're dealing with the same challenges you're facing today, except now your competitors have pulled further ahead. Which version of yourself do you want to be? This frame leverages their natural tendency to avoid future regret while making the abstract consequences of today's decision feel concrete and immediate. The third template is the opportunity window frame. This positions your offer not as a sales pitch, but as a limited time access to something valuable that won't be available indefinitely. The frame shifts from, should I buy this? Can I afford to miss this? This particular combination of circumstances, your team's readiness, the market timing, our availability, creates a window that won't stay open forever. The question isn't whether this makes sense in theory. The question is whether you can afford to let this specific opportunity pass by. Visual aids amplify the power of reframing exponentially. A simple bar graph that shows current performance versus potential performance creates a visual frame that makes the status quo look unacceptable. The same data presented as room for improvement versus competitive disadvantage triggers completely different emotional responses. But reframing isn't a one-time event. It's an ongoing process that requires reinforcement and repetition. The human brain has a tendency to snap back to familiar frames, especially under stress or uncertainty. You need to embed your new frame so deeply that it becomes their default way of seeing the situation. The repeat rephrase rule ensures your frame sticks. Within 90 seconds of introducing a new frame, you need to reinforce it at least 3 times using different language. If you frame the decision as an investment in competitive advantage, you follow up with references to staying ahead of the market, building strategic assets, and positioning for future growth. Each repetition strengthens the neural pathway that supports your frame. Social proof becomes exponentially more powerful when embedded within your frame. Instead of generic testimonials, you share stories of others who made similar decisions within the same frame you're establishing. If you're using the cost of inaction frame, you share examples of companies that waited too long and paid the price. If you're using the future self frame, you paint pictures of clients who are now enjoying the benefits they envisioned. But reframing has pitfalls that can destroy your credibility if you're not careful. Overflipping triggers psychological reactance, the human tendency to resist when they feel their freedom of choice is being manipulated. When you push too hard to change their perspective, their brain pushes back even harder to maintain autonomy. The warning signs are unmistakable. When someone starts using phrases like, "you're trying to pressure me," or "I don't like being sold to," you've crossed the line from influence to manipulation. The solution isn't to retreat, it's to acknowledge their autonomy while maintaining your frame. You're absolutely right to be cautious about any major decision. That's exactly why I want to make sure you're seeing the complete picture, not just the obvious parts. What matters most is that you make the choice that's right for your situation. Mixed frames create confusion and kill momentum. When you try to use multiple frames simultaneously, your prospect's brain can't lock onto any single perspective. They become paralyzed by competing ways of seeing the same situation. Choose one dominant frame and stick with it throughout the entire conversation. The mastery of reframing reveals itself in subtle but unmistakable ways. When you're controlling the frame effectively, your prospects start using your language to describe their situation. They begin seeing their challenges through the lens you've provided. Their questions shift from, "Why should we do this?" to "How do we make this work?" You'll notice their objections become less frequent and less intense. Instead of fighting your recommendations, they start building on them. Instead of finding reasons to say no, they start looking for ways to say yes. The same facts that seemed like obstacles in their original frame become stepping stones in your new frame. Most importantly, you'll see their energy change. Reframing done correctly doesn't just change their thinking, it changes their feeling. They move from defensive to curious, from skeptical to optimistic, from resistant to engaged. The conversation transforms from a negotiation into a collaboration. When you control the frame, you control the outcome. When you can take any set of facts and make them support your position, you become virtually unstoppable. When you can flip doubt into desire with nothing more than a shift in perspective, you've mastered one of the most powerful forces in human psychology. But even the most elegant reframe falls flat if your audience doesn't trust the messenger. The next chapter reveals how to build such unshakable credibility that your words carry the weight of absolute authority, and how 3 specific elements can make even the most skeptical prospect believe every word you say. Chapter 5, Credibility Surge. They don't believe you. It doesn't matter how brilliant your solution is. It doesn't matter how perfectly you've anticipated their objections, mirrored their emotions, or reframed their perspective. If they don't trust you, none of it matters. Every word you speak gets filtered through a skepticism screen that asks one brutal question: why should I believe this person? In a world drowning in false promises and exaggerated claims, credibility has become the scarcest commodity in business. Your prospects have been burned before. They've been oversold and underdelivered. They've been promised the moon and handed a handful of dirt. Their default setting isn't trust, it's suspicion. But what if you could detonate trust so powerfully that skepticism evaporates on contact? What if you could build such unshakable credibility that your words carry the weight of scientific fact? What if you could make doubt impossible by stacking proof so systematically that resistance becomes irrational? This is the credibility surge, a systematic assault on skepticism that leaves no room for doubt. It's not about being likable or charismatic. It's about becoming so obviously credible that questioning your authority feels foolish. The ancient Greeks understood something about persuasion that most modern professionals have forgotten. They identified 3 pillars that must be present for influence to occur: ethos, pathos, and logos. Authority, emotion, and logic. Remove any one pillar and the entire structure collapses. Master all 3 and you become virtually irresistible. Research from Stanford's Persuasive Technology Lab confirms what the Greeks knew intuitively. Websites that deploy all 3 credibility cues keep users engaged twice as long and achieve significantly higher conversion rates. But here's what most people miss: the sequence matters. Authority opens the door. Emotion builds the bridge. Logic closes the deal. Most people get this backwards. They lead with logic, hoping their brilliant analysis will establish their credibility. They bury their authority markers in footnotes and afterthoughts. They treat emotion as weakness rather than the most powerful force in human decision-making. Then they wonder why their perfectly rational arguments fall on deaf ears. You're about to learn how to weaponize credibility so effectively that your prospects will be looking for reasons to believe you rather than reasons to doubt you. The first pillar, ethos, is about establishing your right to be heard. Before anyone will listen to what you have to say, they need to believe you have the authority to say it. This isn't about ego or self-promotion. It's about removing the credibility question from their mental processing so they can focus on your message rather than your qualifications. Authority comes in 2 forms, borrowed and earned. Borrowed authority leverages the credibility of others. the companies you've worked with, the media that's featured you, the certifications you've earned, the experts who endorse you. Earned authority comes from your direct experience, your track record, your demonstrated expertise in solving problems like theirs. Both forms are powerful, but they work differently. Borrowed authority creates instant credibility through association. When you mention that you've worked with recognizable brands or been featured in respected publications, you're borrowing their credibility to boost your own. The prospect's brain makes a simple calculation. If these credible organizations trust this person, maybe I should too. Earned authority runs deeper, but takes longer to establish. It's built through specific examples of results you've achieved, problems you've solved, and value you've created. The key is specificity. Vague claims about helping companies improve performance carry no weight. Precise statements about reducing customer acquisition costs by 34% for a Series B SaaS company create instant credibility. Visual authority markers amplify your credibility without requiring you to say a word. Certification badges, media logos, client testimonials, and award symbols create subconscious credibility cues that work on your prospect's brain before they even engage with your content. These visual elements aren't decoration. They're psychological weapons that lower resistance and increase receptivity. But authority alone isn't enough. You can have all the credentials in the world and still fail to persuade if you can't create an emotional connection. This is where the second pillar, pathos, becomes critical. Emotion is the bridge between credibility and action. People make decisions with their hearts and justify them with their heads. If you can't make them feel something, you can't make them do anything. But emotional connection in a business context isn't about manipulation or artificial sentiment. It's about helping them experience the reality of their situation and the possibility of transformation. Story snapshots are your most powerful emotional weapon. These aren't long, drawn-out narratives that lose your audience's attention. They're precisely crafted 30-word vignettes that paint vivid pictures in your prospect's mind. The constraint forces clarity and impact. Every word must earn its place. The key to effective story snapshots is sensory language that triggers mirror neurons in your prospect's brain. Instead of saying, "The client was frustrated," you say, "The CEO was pacing his office at midnight, watching competitors steal market share while his team struggled with outdated systems." The second version makes your prospect feel the frustration rather than just understand it intellectually. These emotional moments create what psychologists call transportation, the mental state where your prospect becomes so absorbed in the scenario you're painting that they temporarily forget they're being sold to. They start experiencing the emotions of your story as if they were their own. This emotional resonance makes your message unforgettable and your solution irresistible. But emotion without logic is manipulation. The third pillar, logos, provides the rational foundation that allows your prospect to justify their emotional decision. This isn't about drowning them in data or overwhelming them with analysis. It's about providing just enough logical proof to support the emotional case you've already built. Specific numbers demolish skepticism more effectively than any adjective ever could. Significant improvement means nothing. 23% reduction in processing time means everything. The precision implies measurement, and measurement implies professionalism. When you can quantify your claims, you transform opinions into facts. Simple graphs and visual representations of data create instant comprehension and lasting impact. A before and after bar chart that shows dramatic improvement tells a story that no amount of verbal explanation can match. The visual cortex processes images 60,000 times faster than text, which means your graph registers before your words even reach their conscious mind. But the most powerful form of proof isn't your authority, your emotion, or your logic. It's the voice of their peers. People just like them who faced similar challenges and achieved remarkable results. This is where social proof becomes your ultimate credibility weapon. 88% of consumers trust peer recommendations as much as personal referrals. This statistic reveals a fundamental truth about human psychology. We trust people like us more than we trust experts, authorities, or even our own analysis. When someone similar to your prospect endorses your solution, it carries more weight than any credential you could display. The testimonial stack is a systematic approach to social proof that builds credibility through escalating relevance. You start with broad social proof that establishes general credibility, then narrow down to increasingly specific examples that match your prospect's exact situation. You begin with volume. We've helped over 200 companies transform their operations. Then you add industry specificity, including 47 manufacturing companies just like yours. Then you get role-specific. 3 of those were VP-level executives facing the exact same challenge you described. Finally, you deliver the knockout punch. Here's what the VP of operations at a similar company said about the results. Each layer of the stack removes another objection and builds another bridge of trust. By the time you reach the final, most relevant testimonial, skepticism has been systematically dismantled. Live counters and real-time statistics create urgency while building credibility. When your prospect sees that 127 companies have implemented this solution in the past 90 days, they're witnessing social proof in action. The movement and specificity of live data feels more credible than static testimonials because it suggests ongoing validation rather than cherry-picked success stories. But credibility isn't a one-time construction project. It's an ongoing maintenance operation. Your proof points have expiration dates. Statistics become stale. Testimonials lose relevance. Client logos become less impressive as companies evolve or fade from prominence. Quarterly proof audits ensure your credibility arsenal stays sharp and current. You systematically review every authority marker, every testimonial, every statistic, and every visual element to ensure they still serve your credibility objectives. Weak elements get retired. Strong elements get promoted. New proof points get integrated into your existing framework. The goal isn't perfection, it's continuous improvement of your credibility profile. Each quarter, your proof should be stronger, more relevant, and more compelling than the quarter before. This iterative approach ensures that your credibility grows over time rather than degrading through neglect. When you master the credibility surge, something remarkable happens to your conversations. Objections become less frequent and less intense. Questions shift from, "Can you really do this?" to "How quickly can we get started?" Your prospects stop looking for reasons to doubt you and start looking for reasons to move forward. The transformation is visible in their body language, audible in their tone, and measurable in their response rates. When credibility is no longer a question, everything else becomes easier. Your reframes land more powerfully. Your emotional connections deepen more quickly. Your logical arguments face less resistance. But even unshakable credibility can't overcome one fundamental human bias that kills more deals than any other factor. The next chapter reveals how to neutralize the psychological force that makes people choose certain failure over uncertain success, and how to make taking action feel safer than standing still. Chapter 6, Risk Reversal. They're paralyzed by a ghost. Your prospect sits across from you, nodding at your presentation, agreeing with your logic, even getting excited about the possibilities. They can see the value. They understand the benefits. They want what you're offering. But when decision time arrives, they freeze. Not because your solution is wrong, but because their brain is screaming warnings about invisible dangers that might not even exist. This is the tyranny of loss aversion, the psychological force that makes humans fear losing what they have more than they desire gaining what they could have. It's why people stay in jobs they hate rather than risk career changes. It's why companies stick with failing systems rather than implement better ones. It's why your perfectly logical proposals get buried under, "We need to think about it." The math is brutal and precise. Research shows that the pain of losing feels approximately twice as powerful as the pleasure of gaining. This means your prospect needs to believe your solution is twice as good as their current situation just to break even emotionally. And that's before they factor in the risks of change, implementation, and the unknown. But What if you could flip this equation entirely? What if you could make inaction feel riskier than action? What if you could shoulder their fear so completely that moving forward becomes the safe choice? This is risk reversal, the art of transforming fear from your enemy into your ally. When you master this technique, you don't just overcome objections, you make objections impossible. You don't just reduce their risk, you eliminate it entirely. You don't just make your solution attractive, you make it inevitable. The science behind risk reversal reveals why it's so devastatingly effective. Studies show that money-back guarantees increase purchase intent by 21% on average, with some implementations driving conversion lifts as high as 38%. But here's the counterintuitive part. Actual refund rates typically remain below 5%. People want the security of knowing they can get out, but they rarely exercise that option. This creates a psychological phenomenon called the zero-risk bias. When people perceive that the downside has been eliminated, their decision-making process shifts from what could go wrong to what could go right. The same opportunity that seemed dangerous suddenly feels safe. The same investment that felt risky becomes a no-brainer. But risk reversal isn't just about offering refunds. It's about identifying every fear that's preventing action and systematically neutralizing each one until resistance becomes impossible. Your prospects are afraid of 3 types of risk, and each requires a different approach. Financial risk is the fear of losing money, either through direct loss or opportunity cost. Time risk is the fear of wasting effort on something that doesn't deliver results. Social risk is the fear of looking foolish, making a mistake that damages their reputation or career. Financial risk seems obvious, but it's often misunderstood. Your prospect isn't just afraid of losing the money they pay you. They're afraid of the total cost of failure, the implementation time, the opportunity cost, the cleanup expenses if things go wrong. A simple money-back guarantee addresses only part of their financial fear. To truly neutralize financial risk, you need to guarantee not just their investment, but their total cost of engagement. This might mean covering implementation costs if your solution doesn't work. It might mean paying for the cleanup if your system creates problems. It might mean compensating them for the opportunity cost of the time they invested. Time risk is often more paralyzing than financial risk because time can't be recovered. Money lost can be earned back, but months spent on a failed initiative are gone forever. Your prospect is calculating not just the time required for implementation, but the time cost of failure, the delays, the rework, the missed opportunities while they're distracted by fixing problems. The solution is a time guarantee that protects their most valuable resource. You might guarantee specific implementation timelines with penalties for delays. You might promise that if your solution doesn't work, you'll personally handle the transition back to their original system. You might offer to cover the cost of alternative solutions if yours fails to deliver. Social risk is the most complex because it's tied to identity and reputation. Your prospect isn't just buying a solution, they're making a public statement about their judgment. If your solution succeeds, they look smart. If it fails, they look foolish. This fear of professional embarrassment can kill deals even when the logical case is overwhelming. Neutralizing social risk requires protecting their reputation as carefully as you protect their money. This might mean private pilot programs that let them test your solution without public commitment. It might mean taking full responsibility for any failures in your public communications. It might mean providing them with detailed documentation that shows their decision-making process was sound, regardless of outcomes. The structure of your guarantee determines its psychological impact. Longer guarantee periods convert better than shorter ones, but not for the reason most people think. It's not because customers want more time to decide whether to return your product. It's because longer guarantees signal greater confidence in your solution. A 30-day guarantee suggests you're confident your solution will work for 30 days. A 1-year guarantee suggests you're confident it will work for a year. The length of your guarantee becomes a proxy for the strength of your belief in your own solution. When you're willing to stand behind your work for extended periods, prospects interpret that as evidence of quality. But the most powerful guarantees go beyond simple refunds. Better than money-back guarantees create such compelling risk reversals that prospects feel foolish not to try your solution. These might include keeping all the materials even if they request a refund. They might involve paying penalties if you don't deliver promised results. They might offer to work for free until specific outcomes are achieved. The language you use to present your guarantee is as important as the guarantee itself. Weak language signals weakness. When you say, if for any reason you're not satisfied, you're planting the seed of dissatisfaction. When you say, if you're not completely thrilled, you're setting an impossibly high bar that invites disappointment. Strong guarantees use confident language that assumes success while acknowledging the remote possibility of failure. When you see the results we've discussed is better than if you see results. After you experience the transformation is stronger than if you're happy with the changes. The language should reflect your confidence while still providing the security they need. The placement of your guarantee affects its impact dramatically. Guarantees buried at the bottom of proposals feel like legal disclaimers. Guarantees featured prominently signal confidence and remove friction from the decision-making process. The guarantee should appear early enough to influence their evaluation of your proposal, not just their final decision. But risk reversal can backfire if it's not handled carefully. Guarantees that seem too good to be true trigger skepticism rather than confidence. When you offer to take on risks that seem unreasonable, prospects start wondering what you know that they don't. The guarantee should feel generous but believable, protective but not suspicious. Over-guaranteeing can also signal desperation. When you're willing to take on unlimited risk with no corresponding commitment from them, it suggests you're not confident in your ability to attract clients through normal means. The guarantee should feel like confidence, not compensation for weakness. The monitoring phase separates professional risk reversal from amateur hour. You need to track both sides of the equation: how much your guarantees increase conversions and how much they cost in actual refunds. This data tells you whether your risk reversal strategy is profitable or just expensive. Most businesses discover that strong guarantees increase sales far more than they increase refunds. The conversion lift typically outweighs the refund costs by margins of 5 to 1 or better. But this only works if you're delivering real value. Guarantees can't fix fundamentally flawed solutions. They can only remove the friction that prevents good solutions from being adopted. Regular optimization of your guarantee language and structure keeps your risk reversal strategy sharp. Small changes in wording can produce significant changes in conversion rates. Testing different guarantee periods, different language choices, and different presentation formats reveals what resonates most powerfully with your specific audience. When risk reversal is working correctly, you'll notice distinct changes in your conversations. Prospects stop asking about what happens if things go wrong and start asking about what happens when things go right. Their questions shift from defensive to exploratory. Their energy moves from cautious to excited. You'll also see changes in their decision-making timeline. When risk is truly reversed, the urgency to decide increases because delay becomes the risky choice. Why wait when there's no downside to moving forward and potential cost to standing still? Most importantly, you'll find that your guarantees are rarely tested. When people feel completely safe, they're more likely to commit fully to making your solution work. The guarantee that removes their fear of failure often becomes the catalyst that ensures their success. Risk reversal transforms the entire dynamic of your relationship with prospects. Instead of trying to convince them to take a chance on you, you're offering them a chance to win with no possibility of loss. Instead of asking them to trust your promises, you're proving your confidence through your willingness to shoulder their risk. But even when you've eliminated every rational reason for hesitation, the human mind has one more trick that can sabotage the best-laid plans: The next chapter exposes the hidden cognitive traps that make smart people make stupid decisions and reveals how to guide them around these mental landmines without them ever knowing the danger existed. Bias override. Their brain is sabotaging them. Right now, while your prospect nods along with your presentation and agrees with your logic, invisible forces are working against you. Cognitive biases, hardwired mental shortcuts that helped humans survive for millennia, are quietly undermining every rational argument you make. These aren't character flaws or intelligence gaps. They're systematic errors in thinking that affect everyone, including you. Your prospect wants to make the right decision. They're trying to be logical, objective, and smart. But their brain is running background programs that twist information, distort reality, and lead them toward choices that serve ancient survival instincts rather than modern business needs. They don't even know it's happening. Status quo bias makes them overvalue their current situation and undervalue potential improvements. Confirmation bias filters out evidence that contradicts their existing beliefs. Reactance bias makes them resist any suggestion that feels like pressure. These cognitive landmines can detonate without warning, destroying perfectly logical proposals and leaving you wondering what went wrong. But what if you could see these biases before they strike? What if you could neutralize them so completely that logic flows unobstructed? What if you could turn these mental shortcuts from obstacles into allies? This is bias override, the systematic process of identifying, neutralizing, and redirecting the cognitive forces that derail rational decision-making. When you master this skill, you don't just present better arguments, you create mental conditions where your arguments can actually be heard. The research behind cognitive bias is both fascinating and terrifying. Leon Festinger's famous experiment revealed that people will literally change their beliefs to match their actions, rather than admit they made a mistake. Participants who were paid only $1 to lie about enjoying a boring task actually convinced themselves they enjoyed it more than participants who were paid $20. The brain's need for consistency is so powerful that it will rewrite reality rather than acknowledge contradiction. Harvard researchers discovered that simply changing the default option in retirement plans increased participation from 40% to 93%. Same benefits, same company, same employees. The only difference was whether people had to opt in or opt out. This reveals how powerfully our mental shortcuts influence major life decisions without us realizing it. These biases aren't bugs in human programming. They're features that served our ancestors well. Status quo bias kept them from abandoning proven survival strategies for untested alternatives. Confirmation bias helped them maintain confidence in their worldview when doubt could be fatal. Reactance bias protected their autonomy when submission could mean death. But in modern business contexts, these same mental shortcuts become decision-making disasters. The status quo that feels safe might be slowly killing their company. The beliefs they're confirming might be outdated or wrong. The autonomy they're protecting might be preventing necessary change. Your job isn't to fight these biases head-on. That's a battle you'll never win. Your job is to work with them, around them, and through them so skillfully that your prospect never realizes their mental shortcuts have been redirected. The first step is learning to spot bias in real time. Status quo bias reveals itself through specific language patterns that signal resistance to change. When someone says, "We've always done it this way," they're not just describing their process, they're expressing a cognitive preference for familiar over optimal. When they mention, "If it ain't broke, don't fix it," they're revealing that their brain categorizes their current situation as not broken, regardless of evidence to the contrary. Confirmation bias shows up when prospects selectively engage with information that supports their existing position while ignoring or dismissing contradictory evidence. They'll spend 20 minutes discussing minor benefits that align with their preconceptions while glossing over major advantages that challenge their assumptions. Reactance bias triggers when prospects feel their freedom of choice is being threatened. The moment they sense pressure, their brain activates resistance mechanisms that make them want to do the opposite of what you're suggesting. Language like "you need to," or "you must," or "you should" can flip their mental switch from consideration to opposition. Once you've identified which biases are active, you can deploy specific techniques to neutralize them without triggering additional resistance. The key is making your prospect feel like they're choosing rather than being chosen for. For status quo bias, you don't attack their current approach directly. Instead, you help them see that maintaining the status quo is actually a choice, and potentially a risky one. You reframe inaction as action and current processes as decisions that need to be actively maintained rather than passively continued. I can see why you've stuck with your current system. It's clearly served you well up to this point. The question now is whether what got you here is what will get you where you want to go next. What would need to change in your market for your current approach to become a liability rather than an asset? This approach acknowledges the wisdom of their past choices while opening space for future evolution. You're not telling them their current approach is wrong. You're helping them recognize that circumstances change and strategies must evolve accordingly. Confirmation bias requires a more subtle approach. Instead of presenting contradictory evidence that their brain will reject, you start with points they already agree with and gradually expand their perspective. This is the foot-in-the-door technique applied to belief systems. You begin with micro-agreements that feel obvious and non-threatening. I imagine you'd agree that staying competitive requires constant adaptation. Once they've committed to this principle, you can apply it to their specific situation. Given that adaptability is crucial for competitiveness, what areas of your operation might benefit from fresh thinking? Each small agreement creates psychological momentum toward larger commitments. Their brain's consistency mechanism, which normally works against you, starts working for you. They become invested in maintaining alignment with positions they've already taken. Public commitments amplify this effect exponentially. When someone states a position out loud, especially in front of others, their brain's consistency drive becomes almost irresistible. They will go to remarkable lengths to avoid appearing inconsistent with their public statements. This is why getting prospects to articulate their goals, challenges, and criteria in their own words is so powerful. Once they've publicly committed to wanting specific outcomes, their brain starts looking for ways to achieve those outcomes rather than reasons to avoid action. Reactance bias requires the most delicate touch because it's triggered by the perception of pressure, not just actual pressure. The solution is to give prospects genuine choice while structuring those choices to favor your desired outcome. Instead of telling them what they should do, you present options and let them choose. Instead of pushing them toward a decision, you help them discover what they already want. Instead of applying pressure, you remove obstacles to their natural decision-making process. There are really three paths you could take here. You could stick with your current approach and hope the market doesn't shift too dramatically. You could explore partial solutions that address some of your challenges without major disruption. Or you could implement a comprehensive transformation that positions you ahead of these trends. Which of these feels most aligned with your risk tolerance and growth objectives? This approach gives them complete autonomy while subtly guiding them toward the comprehensive solution. They don't feel pressured because they're choosing freely among legitimate alternatives. Cognitive dissonance, the mental discomfort that occurs when beliefs and actions don't align, can be your most powerful ally when handled correctly. Instead of trying to change their beliefs to match your recommendations, you help them see how your recommendations align with beliefs they already hold. People like you typically value innovation and staying ahead of the curve. That's probably why you've been so successful in a competitive market. This solution is really just an extension of that same forward-thinking approach that served you well. This technique, called the self-consistency bridge, makes your proposal feel like a natural expression of their existing identity rather than a departure from it. Their brain doesn't have to choose between their self-image and your solution. It can have both. The narrative rewrite technique goes even deeper by helping prospects see their current situation as part of a larger story that naturally leads to your solution. Instead of positioning change as a break from their past, you position it as the logical next chapter in their ongoing success story. You've built something impressive here by being willing to make bold decisions when others were playing it safe. That same instinct that led you to take calculated risks in the past is probably telling you that this is another one of those moments where bold action separates leaders from followers. This reframes your proposal not as a risky departure, but as a continuation of the strategic thinking that made them successful in the first place. The audit phase ensures your bias override techniques are working effectively. After each significant conversation, you review which biases were present, which techniques you deployed, and how effectively they neutralized resistance. This post-meeting analysis becomes intelligence that improves your performance in future encounters. You also track what you might call your bias override success score, the percentage of conversations where you successfully neutralize cognitive resistance without triggering reactance. This metric tells you whether you're becoming more skilled at working with human psychology rather than against it. When bias override is working correctly, you'll notice that prospects become more open to information that challenges their assumptions. They start asking exploratory questions rather than defensive ones. Their language shifts from but to and, from however to what if, from resistance to curiosity. Most importantly, they begin to feel like your recommendations are their ideas. This isn't manipulation, it's alignment. You're helping them discover what they already want while removing the psychological obstacles that prevent them from pursuing it. Mastering bias override transforms you from someone who fights human nature into someone who works with it. You stop trying to overcome cognitive shortcuts and start redirecting them toward better outcomes. You become a guide who helps people navigate around their own mental landmines. But even when you've neutralized every bias and removed every psychological obstacle, there's still one final challenge that can destroy your momentum in seconds. The next chapter reveals how to handle the moment when doubt crystallizes into objection, and how the right response can turn resistance into rocket fuel for closing the deal. Chapter 8. Rapid Rebuttal. The clock is ticking against you. The moment your prospect voices an objection, a psychological timer starts counting down. Every second you hesitate, every pause you take to think, every or well that escapes your lips feeds their doubt and strengthens their resistance. What starts as a simple concern quickly metastasizes into deal-killing certainty if you don't act fast. Most people treat objections like complex puzzles that require careful analysis and thoughtful responses. They pause, they ponder, they craft elaborate explanations that address every nuance of the concern. By the time they finish their perfectly logical rebuttal, their prospect's brain has already moved on to finding new reasons to say no. This is the fatal flaw in traditional objection handling. It's too slow. While you're building your case, their doubt is building faster. While you're explaining why their concern isn't valid, they're finding new concerns to replace it. While you're trying to be thorough, they're becoming more convinced that you don't have a real answer. But what if you could neutralize objections so quickly that doubt never has time to solidify? What if you could turn resistance into momentum in under 30 seconds? What if your speed of response became a weapon that crushed hesitation before it could take root? This is rapid rebuttal, the art of responding to objections with such velocity and precision that your prospect's brain doesn't have time to build additional resistance. It's not about having all the answers. It's about having the right structure to deliver any answer with devastating speed. The science behind rapid response is both simple and profound. Research from Velocify shows that responding to inquiries within 1 minute increases conversion rates by 391% compared to responses that take longer. But this isn't just about customer service. It's about how the human brain processes information under pressure. When someone voices an objection, they're in what psychologists call System 1 thinking: fast, emotional, intuitive. If you respond slowly, you force them into System 2 thinking: analytical, logical, skeptical. System 2 is where objections multiply and deals die. System 1 is where emotions flow and decisions happen. Your goal is to keep them in System 1 by responding so quickly that their analytical mind never fully engages. You hit their emotional brain with empathy and understanding, then feed their logical brain a clear next step before doubt has time to reload. Sales professionals who master structured rebuttals double their close rates from 17% to 31%. But here's what most people miss. The structure isn't what makes rebuttals powerful. The speed is. The same rebuttal delivered in 30 seconds versus 3 minutes produces completely different outcomes. Speed signals confidence. When you respond instantly to their concern, your prospect's brain interprets that as evidence that you've heard this objection before and have a proven solution. When you hesitate, their brain reads uncertainty and starts looking for additional problems. The foundation of rapid rebuttal is a 3-part loop that works regardless of the specific objection: acknowledge, align, advance. This isn't just a framework. It's a psychological weapon that transforms adversaries into allies in seconds. The acknowledge phase must happen in 10 seconds or less. You're not agreeing with their objection. You're demonstrating that you heard and understood it. This is where tactical empathy meets lightning speed. You mirror their concern back to them using their exact language, then label the emotion behind it. So you're concerned about the implementation timeline, and it sounds like you're feeling pressure to make sure this doesn't disrupt your current operations. Notice what's happening here. You've repeated their key phrase, implementation timeline, which triggers their mirror neurons and makes them feel heard. You've labeled their underlying emotion, pressure, which activates their empathy circuits and reduces their stress response, and you've done it all in under 10 seconds. The align phase flips the dynamic from adversarial to collaborative. Instead of defending your position against their attack, you establish a shared goal that makes you allies rather than opponents. This is where the magic happens. You transform their objection from a barrier into a bridge. We both want to make sure this implementation goes smoothly and actually enhances your operations rather than disrupting them. This simple statement reframes the entire conversation. You're no longer trying to overcome their resistance. You're working together to solve a mutual challenge. Their brain stops looking for reasons to fight you and starts looking for ways to work with you. The advance phase proposes a specific micro-step that moves the conversation forward without triggering additional resistance. This isn't about closing the deal. It's about maintaining momentum while addressing their concern. What if we start by mapping out a detailed implementation plan that shows exactly how we'll minimize disruption at each phase? This proposal feels safe because it's just planning, not commitment. But it advances your agenda because the act of planning together builds investment and reveals additional opportunities to address their concerns. The entire loop, acknowledge, align, advance, should take 30 seconds maximum. Any longer, and you risk losing their emotional engagement. Any shorter, and you risk seeming dismissive of their concern. But speed without precision is just noise. The language you use in your rapid rebuttals determines whether you accelerate toward agreement or crash into additional resistance. The word "but" is poison in rapid rebuttals because it negates everything that came before it. When you say, "I understand your concern, but," their brain hears, "I'm about to dismiss your concern." The word "but" triggers defensive responses that destroy the rapport you just built. Replace "but" with "and yet" or "and" to maintain connection while introducing new information. I understand your concern about timeline, and yet we've found that proper planning actually accelerates implementation, feels collaborative rather than confrontational. Power verbs create forward momentum and imply that progress is inevitable. Words like move, secure, advance, capture, and lock in suggest action and urgency. Weak verbs like try, attempt, consider, and explore suggest uncertainty and delay. Let's move forward with mapping the implementation timeline feels more decisive than let's try to figure out the implementation process. The verb choice alone changes the energy of the entire interaction. The precision of your language also affects the speed of your delivery. Crisp, specific words flow faster than vague, general ones. Implementation timeline is faster than the process of putting this system into place. Revenue impact is faster than the effect this might have on your financial performance. Practice sessions with stopwatch timing transform rapid rebuttal from theory into reflex. Set up objection scenarios and force yourself to complete the acknowledge, align, advance loop in 30 seconds or less. Record yourself and identify where you're losing time, usually in the acknowledge phase where people over-explain or in the advance phase where they propose too many options. The 45-second objection gauntlet is particularly effective for building speed. Have someone fire objections at you rapid-fire style, giving you only 45 seconds to respond to each one before moving to the next. This creates pressure that simulates real-world conditions and forces you to rely on structure rather than improvisation. Weekly reduction targets keep you improving consistently. Track your average response time and aim to reduce it by 15% each week. This might mean cutting your acknowledge phase from 15 seconds to 12, or streamlining your advance proposals to eliminate unnecessary words. But speed isn't just about talking faster, it's about thinking faster. The real breakthrough comes when you internalize the loop structure so completely that you can deploy it without conscious thought. Your brain automatically categorizes any objection and routes it through the appropriate response pathway. This automation frees up mental bandwidth for reading your prospects' reactions and adjusting your approach in real time. Instead of thinking about what to say next, you're thinking about how they're responding to what you just said. The metrics that matter in rapid rebuttal are simple but revealing. Track your first rebuttal time, how quickly you respond to the initial objection in any conversation. Correlate this with deal velocity, how quickly prospects move through your sales process. You'll discover a strong relationship between response speed and decision speed. You'll also notice that rapid rebuttals create a momentum effect that carries through the entire conversation. When you handle the first objection with lightning speed and surgical precision, subsequent objections become less frequent and less intense. Your prospect's brain learns that resistance is futile because you have an instant answer for everything. The transformation in your conversations becomes obvious within weeks of mastering rapid rebuttal. Objections that used to derail your presentations become minor speed bumps that you navigate without losing momentum. Prospects who used to build walls of resistance start building bridges of collaboration. Most importantly, you'll find that the speed of your rebuttals affects the speed of their decisions. When you respond to concerns instantly, they start making choices instantly. When you eliminate the lag time in objection handling, you eliminate the lag time in deal progression. Rapid rebuttal isn't just about handling objections, it's about controlling the tempo of influence. When you can neutralize resistance in seconds rather than minutes, you maintain the emotional momentum that drives decisions. When you can turn every objection into an opportunity to advance, you become unstoppable. But even the most masterful objection handling is worthless if your prospect walks away and forgets everything you discussed. The final chapter reveals how to lock in agreements so powerfully that buyer's remorse becomes impossible, and how the right follow-up sequence can turn one-time clients into lifetime advocates. Chapter 9, Agreement Reinforced. The handshake is just the beginning. Right now, while you're celebrating that hard-fought agreement, your prospect is walking away with a ticking time bomb in their head. Buyer's remorse is already forming. Doubt is creeping in. The voice that whispers, "Did I make the right decision?" is getting louder with every step they take away from your meeting. This is the moment when most deals die. Not during the negotiation, but in the hours and days after the agreement is signed. Your prospect goes back to their office, talks to their team, sleeps on the decision, and suddenly what seemed like a brilliant choice starts feeling like a terrible mistake. The statistics are brutal. Studies show that up to 40% of signed agreements never actually get implemented. Not because the solution was wrong, but because the psychological momentum that drove the decision evaporates in the cold light of second thoughts. Your perfect pitch, your flawless objection handling, your masterful close, all of it becomes worthless if you can't protect the agreement after it's made. But what if you could make buyer's remorse impossible? What if you could turn every agreement into the foundation for deeper loyalty and endless referrals? What if the moment they said yes became the moment your real influence began? This is agreement reinforcement, the systematic process of protecting, strengthening, and leveraging every deal you close. It's about transforming one-time transactions into lifetime relationships, isolated victories into compounding success, and satisfied customers into passionate advocates. The psychology behind post-agreement dynamics reveals why this phase is so critical. Expectancy disconfirmation theory shows that satisfaction depends not on absolute outcomes, but on how reality compares to expectations. When you exceed expectations early and often, you create a psychological momentum that makes future satisfaction more likely. The Zeigarnik effect demonstrates that unfinished tasks occupy significantly more mental bandwidth than completed ones, up to 90% more according to research. This means that strategic incompleteness can keep your solution top of mind and drive continued engagement long after the initial agreement. Bain & Company's research reveals the economic power of retention. Increasing customer retention by just 5% can boost profits by 25% to 95%. But this isn't just about keeping customers. It's about turning them into growth engines that generate referrals, testimonials, and market credibility that accelerate every future deal. The first 24 hours after agreement are the most critical. This is when buyer's remorse is strongest, when doubt is loudest, when the decision feels most reversible. Your job is to flood this vulnerable period with evidence that they made the right choice. The quick win delivery is your most powerful weapon against buyer's remorse. Within 24 hours of their agreement, you need to deliver something tangible that proves immediate value. This doesn't have to be your full solution. It just has to be something that makes them feel smart for choosing you. This might be a detailed implementation plan that shows you've already started working on their behalf. It might be a customized analysis that reveals insights they didn't expect. It might be access to resources that solve an immediate problem they mentioned. The key is speed and relevance. You're proving that their decision is already paying dividends. The confirmation email becomes a psychological anchor that reinforces their choice while setting expectations for what comes next. This isn't a generic "thank you for your business" message. It's a strategic communication that strengthens their commitment and builds anticipation for future value. The anatomy of an effective confirmation email includes 3 critical elements: a result snapshot that summarizes what they've gained, a next step preview that maintains momentum, and an open loop that keeps them mentally engaged. You're not just confirming what happened, you're painting a picture of what's coming. Based on our conversation today, you're now positioned to reduce processing time by 30% while improving accuracy across your entire operation. I'm already working on the custom integration plan we discussed, and you'll have the detailed roadmap by Thursday. In our next session, I'll show you exactly how the top performer in your industry uses this same system to maintain their competitive edge. Notice how this email reinforces their smart decision, promises immediate progress, and creates curiosity about future value. Their brain gets satisfaction from the progress already made and anticipation for what's coming next. But the real magic happens in the open-loop strategy. Before your initial meeting ends, you schedule the next touchpoint and tease the value they'll receive. This isn't just about maintaining contact. It's about leveraging the psychological power of unfinished business to keep your solution mentally active. Before we wrap up, let's schedule our follow-up for next week. I want to show you the advanced optimization techniques that most of our clients don't discover until month 3. You're going to love what this does to your efficiency metrics. This approach serves multiple purposes. It maintains engagement momentum, prevents the relationship from going cold, and creates anticipation that makes your next interaction feel valuable rather than intrusive. They're not being sold to. They're receiving exclusive insights that justify their initial decision. The 30-day mark represents a critical inflection point in customer psychology. This is when the novelty of their decision has worn off, but the full benefits haven't yet materialized. It's also the optimal time to activate their advocacy potential through strategic referral requests. The Net Promoter Score methodology reveals that customers are most likely to make referrals when they're experiencing peak satisfaction, typically around 30 days after implementation begins. This is when they've seen enough results to feel confident in their decision, but haven't yet taken those results for granted. The Referral Accelerator script leverages this psychological sweet spot by making the request feel like recognition rather than obligation. You're not asking them to sell for you. You're acknowledging their expertise and asking them to share their success. I've been thinking about your results, and I'm genuinely impressed with how quickly you've implemented these changes. You clearly have a talent for operational excellence that most leaders struggle with. I'm curious, do you know other executives who might benefit from seeing what you've accomplished? I'd love to show them the same framework that's working so well for you. This approach works because it positions the referral as a way for them to demonstrate their own success rather than as a favor to you. Their ego gets fed while your pipeline gets filled. The reward signal matters more than the actual reward. Research shows that the promise of recognition often motivates referral behavior more effectively than cash incentives. When you offer to feature their success story, mention their company in presentations, or connect them with other high performers, you're providing social currency that money can't buy. But agreement reinforcement isn't just about individual relationships. It's about creating systematic processes that compound your influence over time. The metrics you track in this phase become leading indicators of long-term business success. The 30-day engagement score measures how actively your clients are participating in the value creation process. High engagement correlates strongly with satisfaction, retention, and referral generation. Low engagement signals potential churn and gives you early warning to intervene. Proactive check-ins during this critical period can dramatically improve outcomes. When you reach out before problems arise, you're seen as a strategic partner rather than a reactive vendor. When you wait for them to contact you with issues, you're seen as a cost center that requires management attention. The correlation between proactive touchpoints and renewal rates is striking. Clients who receive regular, value-focused check-ins renew at rates 40% higher than those who only hear from you when something goes wrong. But the quality of these touchpoints matters more than the quantity. Each interaction must provide genuine value, new insights, additional resources, strategic perspectives they can't get elsewhere. You're not checking in to see how things are going, you're checking in to make things go better. The compounding effect of agreement reinforcement becomes visible over time. Satisfied clients become case studies that close future deals. Successful implementations become proof points that overcome objections. Happy customers become referral sources that reduce your acquisition costs. But the ultimate payoff goes beyond individual transactions or even individual relationships. When you master agreement reinforcement, you create a reputation in your market that makes selling unnecessary. Prospects come to you already convinced because they've heard about your results from people they trust. Your close rate increases not because you've become better at closing, but because you're attracting pre-qualified prospects who are already 80% sold before you meet them. Your sales cycle shortens not because you're pushing harder, but because your reputation removes most of the friction from the decision-making process. This is the true power of agreement reinforcement, It transforms every deal you close into a marketing asset that makes future deals easier to close. Every satisfied customer becomes a sales force that works on your behalf. Every successful implementation becomes proof that reduces skepticism and accelerates decisions. When you've mastered all 9 elements of objection disarmament, from anticipating resistance to reinforcing agreements, you don't just become better at handling objections. You become someone who rarely faces objections at all. Your reputation precedes you, your credibility speaks for itself, and your track record eliminates doubt before it can form. The prospects who once saw you as a vendor trying to sell them something now see you as an expert, offering them access to proven results. The conversations that once felt like negotiations now feel like consultations. The relationships that once required constant maintenance now generate their own momentum. This is what mastery looks like: a business where objections are rare, agreements are easy, and every client becomes a catalyst for exponential growth. You've moved beyond selling to prospects and started serving advocates. You've transcended the transaction and created transformation, not just for your clients, but for your entire professional trajectory. The sniper of doubt that once threatened every deal has been permanently neutralized. In its place stands an army of advocates who make your success inevitable.